Hello, and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers. Hello, empaths. Today we're going to be discussing karmic relationships. That sounds heavy, doesn't it, Denise? We don't mean it to be a heavy show. We mean it to be fun and enlightening and informative.
Right. And it will be.
Yes. Well, what exactly is a karmic relationship? In short, they are spiritual connections formed as part of our soul's journey towards growth and resolution of past karmic debts. It's a connection between two people that was orchestrated in your soul plan so that you and this person could heal karma from past lives or use your connection to teach one another important life lessons for growth and healing. The concept of karma, deeply embedded in Eastern philosophies like Hinduism and Buddhism, refers to the law of cause and effect, suggesting that our thoughts, actions, and intentions in one life have consequences that may carry over into future lives. So, in the context of relationships, karma is seen as a spiritual agreement between souls to come together again in a new life to resolve unresolved emotions or patterns. This is often why karmic relationships are marked by intense emotional reactions, both positive and negative, and why they can feel like a deep, unexplainable connection, even if they are unhealthy or toxic. So, what this means is that before you came to Earth, you and this person agreed to meet and work on these issues together. They give us opportunities to learn big, heavy, important lessons. And we're not just talking about romantic relationships. You can have karmic ties with parents, siblings, children's friends, even coworkers. And these relationships, though intense and sometimes tumultuous, are not necessarily meant to last forever. Instead, they serve as powerful life lessons, pushing us toward healing, self-awareness, and personal growth. I think, Denise, if you sit back and think about some of the relationships you have in your life, you can see the karmic relationships. You can see the ones that were heavy and intense and taught us something, right?
Right. And I think it's a lot of times we might focus on, oh, I had this issue with a sibling or my ex-spouse or my in-laws, or we equate it all to people that are really, really close in our circle. But what I'm finding over the last several months and a couple of years actually is that the people that we're meant to connect with on a soul group level that might not be genetic are also showing up. And these karmic relationships are to, we're helping each other, the old Ram Dass walking each other home. I really think that that level of karmic relationship is something that we said, okay, we're going to be going through some heavy shit. I'm going to look out for you. You're going to look out for me, and we're going to get through this.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think we should confuse karmic relationships with soulmates or twin flame type of relationships just because of the intensity. I think that there are some distinctions, right? A lot of times if you have a soulmate relationship, it can feel very intense, but if it's a genuine soulmate, there's not that chaos, that drama, that negativity, that sense of I have to be with you, I can't be without you. That's more of a karmic relationship, whereas soulmate relationships are, I don't want to say easy, but they're gentle and flowing, and there's just this sense of knowing you belong together. So I don't want anyone to confuse those two. Can you tell us about some common signs of a karmic relationship?
Well, often it'll be, as you mentioned, intense connection right from the start. Right when you meet someone, there's just this unbelievable connection and draw, like you've known them forever, even if you've just met. And this can feel overwhelming sometimes because there's such a sense of familiarity that you might even question, wow, have I met you before? Do I know you? That's often a sign of a true karmic relationship, is that recognition and familiarity and knowing that you just get each other right from the start.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing. Like a lot of karmic relationships are super positive, and I think it's important that we make that clear from the outset of this episode. One of my best friends, we met when our kids were babies, and we instantly felt that connection, that, oh, I know you, that sense of we're in this together. And within, I don't know, 2 years of us becoming friends, she had a lot of heavy stuff go on in her life. My former husband was shot in the line of duty. Like, and we just have always said that God put us in each other's paths at that time because we really helped each other get through those intense highs and lows that we experienced. And so I think oftentimes with karmic relationships, you do have this sense of, oh, I've known you forever. And maybe that's a good thing, and maybe it's not a good thing. It's very, I don't know, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's very black or white. It's very up or down, with these karmic relationships. It's either really good or really not good, which is the second significor of a karmic relationships where you might experience emotional highs and lows. So if we're talking about, say, a romantic karmic relationship, you might have extreme joys and lots of passion, but then you can swing to the opposite end as well with emotional turbulence, arguments, drama. And so it's kind of like an emotional roller coaster that makes the relationship feel unstable and overwhelming.
And what's really difficult with that is that because of that sense of familiarity, that knowing, that connection that you had from the onset, oftentimes when you do start that roller coaster ride with someone, there's something that may keep you in it longer than is healthy or necessary because well, for me personally, that sense of, well, why would I feel so strong a connection with someone if this wasn't something I was supposed to continue with? Maybe it's just loyal dog syndrome. I don't know.
No, I think that's a really good point because that sense of connection you feel so strongly is what hooks you.
Right. Right, but that constant up and down, that being on edge, and I would guarantee that 99.9% of the people that are listening to this can relate to that with someone in their life, that they felt such a strong connection, but then it was when it's good, it's really good, and when it's bad, it's really bad. And I always joke and say, the people who don't have lukewarm, you either get warm and loving or you get kind of mean as a snake. And that's kind of a part of this because we stick through it, but we are learning and growing while we're in it.
Yeah, exactly. The third sign that you might be in a karmic relationship is repetition of patterns. So, in karmic relationships, you might find yourself stuck in these repetitive cycles of conflict with the same issues coming up over and over. This repetition is a sign that there's an unresolved karmic lesson you're meant to learn. That one might be a little hard. I'm just thinking about long-term relationships like marriages. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's always going to be the same issue that comes up over and over. Don't you think? I remember when I got married way back in the 90s, in the Catholic Church, you have to go through this thing called I don't know, marriage encounter or engaged encounter weekend. And you take this like really intense test. I mean, like with a pencil and you bubble in the answers and you put it into the scan thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's designed to show you like what you and your partner have in common and what are some conflicts. And then the priest will sit you down and talk to you about it. And I remember we had the same issue that we argued about that showed up in that test. And he said, what you guys are fighting about now, you'll be fighting about in 20 years. And he said that to every single couple there. He said that's just what long-term relationships usually involve. And I don't know. Do you think that's true?
Is the repetition of patterns until someone says, I'm not doing this anymore. And that was the karmic lesson that you came in to learn, is that
Yeah.
you agreed to keep replaying the tape and going through those same conflicts or having that be a major detriment to your relationship. And then one of you says, I can't, and steps back. Is the karmic relationship completed at that point?
I would say so.
Or no, I can't say completed because I think even though when we look back at people who have had significant impact in our lives and we know they're karmic and we know that we came in to do big lessons with them or big work, they still remain a part of our life, even if they're not in our everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. That's
Um,
very true. The echo can be long. All right. And the fourth sign is feeling trapped. Despite the emotional pain and conflicts, it can be incredibly difficult to walk away from a karmic relationship. This sense of being trapped is a result of the karmic bond, which creates a feeling of dependency or unfinished business. Oh, that feels heavy. That reminds me of, I'm looking to see if it's in my bookshelf right behind me. There's a really good book called The Fantasy Bond,
Mm-hmm.
more about karmic relationships between parents and children. And it's about how children, as they grow up, have like this fantasy idea of what their mom should be or what their dad should be. And we project that fantasy onto our parents, and it never really comes to fruition. And so that book is about breaking that fantasy bond. It kind of reminds me of this description.
That's a really good example. And I'm thinking of adults that I know that are still in that place of wanting people to be something in their lives that they're not capable of being.
Yeah,
And that's difficult. It's painful.
very, very painful. And but that's why I'm always saying the only way out, the only way through any problem or challenge anyone is dealing with is raw honesty. You gotta wake up from that fantasy and undo those chains yourself. It's like the devil card in the tarot. If you look, they're not really chained. It's very, very, very loose. They could step right out of that.
This relates back to shows we've done about trauma, trauma bonds. If the person that you have the karmic relationship with is also potentially the person who was part of a trauma that was instilled in your psyche over your lifetime, that's going to make it even more difficult to step out of that trap situation because you've
Mhm.
been, I wouldn't say Stockholm syndrome or programmed, but there is a another component to it if there's heavy trauma or grief involved.
Exactly. Okay, sign 5 that you're in a karmic relationship, pushing each other's buttons. Karmic partners often seem to know exactly how to trigger each other's insecurities and emotional wounds. This is because karmic relationships are meant to bring unresolved issues to the surface, forcing both individuals to confront and heal them. Well, that sounds fun.
And it's true. I mean, I'm sure that you can name on one hand the top people in your life that know where your buttons are. And I've shared this on other episodes. It's because they're the ones who helped install them. And I heard that on an old movie years and years and years ago. And those middle of the night movies that they used to play, the old black and white movies from the 40s. And someone had said that in the movie. I thought that is so damn spot on.
Yeah, it really is. And I think if you know someone really, really well, you do know what will trigger them. And if you love them, you don't push that button.
But there's also the going back to familiarity of, and I'm thinking of some triggers I used to have when I was with my ex-husband, but they were very similar triggers from my family of origin. So it wasn't that he installed the triggers, he just reactivated them with
Mm,
similar behaviors.
yeah. And I think if you had, I mean, I think this is so hard to do, and I don't know that I've fully untriggered my buttons, but I think when you own the button, right? And you say, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is an insecurity of mine. That is something that is very hurtful or upsetting or makes me anxious. If you own that button, you do untrigger it. You do make it so that it's not anything anyone else can push.
Right. You're in control of it. It can't be used against you.
Exactly. Okay, the sixth sign that you're in a karmic relationship is learning and growth. Despite the challenges, karmic relationships serve a higher purpose, personal growth. These relationships act as mirrors, reflecting back your deepest fears, insecurities, and unresolved traumas, offering you the opportunity to grow and evolve. And I think that's true. It's so hard to go through those karmic relationships off very often, but hindsight, you look back and you think, wow, have I gotten stronger?
And sometimes it takes a while to find that hindsight, and that's okay.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, 100%. And sign seven that you're in a karmic relationship, it is difficult to sustain long term. Karmic relationships are not meant to be permanent. They often burn out after the lessons are learned, leaving both partners to move on and find healthier, more balanced connections. If one or both partners refuse to learn the lessons, the relationship can become destructive.
Another factor to work into this last one is we both know people who have stayed in situations with relationships, with friendships, with jobs, with circumstances, because there's a lot to lose if they step out of it. It could be financial, it could be societal, it could be community, it could be all of these different aspects. And then people just kind of flatline and say, well, this is just what my life is, and I need to live in it. And I think if there's a karmic relationship tie in that, it almost feels like it's a hook keeping you stuck in that place because you've just let go. You've I don't want to say you're settling because that's not the word I'm looking for, but you're willing to just exist rather than live.
It's the saddest thing to see, isn't it?
It is. It is sad, but it also is that again part of the karmic lesson is I need to know what it feels like not to step into my own.
Maybe, but that's a long, hard lesson to learn.
It is, but I spoke with someone recently, and not in a reading, just as someone that I've known for a very long time. And I listened to the tone and the inflection. This is a casual acquaintance that I hadn't seen in quite a while. And it was a resignation in their voice of where they were in their life, what had happened, the choices they had made. And it was really obvious they weren't happy. They weren't happy with where they are now or what they chose to do with all those decades. And I think that sometimes a karmic relationship, a long term karmic relationship that you don't step away from, can lead to that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. And I think you always need to ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? Is it just that you're saving money? Is it that, you're saving face in front of your fellow church members or your neighbors? Is it like what are you getting out of staying in that relationship? I think you have to really be honest about that. Because I mean, gosh, you and I have seen so many clients who stay in horrible relationships, some for very valid reasons like fear and not having any financial resources to move on, and others for reasons that, are troubling to see.
Yes, and this is heavy. These are not, it's not easy to think, oh, am I trapped in a karmic relationship? What do I need to do to get out? But finding bravery is always an option.
Yes, that is so true. And I'm a big advocate of finding little joys in each day.
Yeah.
I think that helps you get through it while you're treading water in the sea of difficulty that often these relationships can be. There's a writer who had a great quote on karmic relationships. Her name is Althea Luna, and she writes, "The nature of life is that there must be friction to grow. A baby chick must peck its way out of the shell. A seedling must push out of the earth. A newborn is squeezed and screamed out of the womb. We too must go through this process of tension and release, death and rebirth. And yet, despite the blood, sweat, and tears, we eventually realize that our pain never diminished our essence, it forged it. Our egos may be shattered, but our souls can never be touched. Perhaps that is the biggest spiritual lesson of karmic relationships. They open us to the power of love through the gateway of letting go. They remind us of who we truly are." And I just think
It,
that's a lovely way of
it's
highlighting,
beautiful.
yeah, the growth that comes from this.
Right. And another aspect, I was talking with a group the other night and we were talking about when you can get to a place of compassion for someone who has caused pain in your life, then you know that you're doing the healing and you have the ownership to move in a new direction for yourself on your own path. And I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of what she's saying because we've been brought up with, oh, well, if it doesn't if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, or all those horrific things that people say. But this is true. We need to have some conflict and some challenges because it gives us a sense of appreciation for all the beauty that there really is and who we truly are.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It gives us appreciation for ourselves.
Yeah.
Another aspect of being in a karmic relationship is that you don't feel safe. And I don't even think that necessarily means physically safe, although very often it can. But I think it also means emotionally safe to be your true self. And I don't think I really realized what that meant. Today, as we record this, is the 1 year anniversary of my mom's passing. And I remember, my dad had died 18 months before my mom, or 16 months. And I couldn't speak at his funeral. And it really shamed me, I have to be honest. But I was crying so much I couldn't speak up for him. And my sisters did, but I couldn't. And when it came time for my mom's funeral, I was like, I've got to speak at her funeral. I can't do what I did to dad to her. But, that was even more complicated because, y'all know what kind of relationship I have with my mom. So I was really, really nervous the day of her funeral, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had been with my fiance, Michael, for a while then. And I don't know, Denise, just knowing he was there made me feel safe.
Hmm.
And I was able to get up and give a lovely, kind of humorous eulogy. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I wasn't in that safe feeling of being loved. And I don't think I ever knew what that felt like before. Just, you know what I mean? Like just to feel like you were completely supported, and even if you got up there and I don't know, cried through the whole thing, which I didn't. But that feeling of just being unconditionally loved, that was very, very new to me. And then that moment highlighted it for me. So I think when these articles and the research you and I did were talking about how you don't feel safe in these karmic relationships, again, I think very often they are talking about physical safety. But I think a big part of that is just that emotional safety of knowing that you are just loved and supported as you are.
Right. And I do think it can be emotional safety, or if you've been ridiculed or demeaned, or there have been people in your life who, again, know your triggers and know how to cut you down with their words, that can also be. But see, now I would put your relationship with Michael, that level, as another form of karmic relationship, that you two came in to do this together. In all, it's all the positive aspects of being in a karmic relationship. And we're looking at the ways to identify, is this not healthy? Is this something that isn't feeding your soul? But I think that the two of you do come in with, do you feel that, or do you think it's something different?
I don't know if it's karmic or not. I feel like it's just a reward.
You get the grand prize at the fair. Perfect.
Yeah, I feel like, God was like, we got to cut this girl some breaks. So that's, I don't
Perfect.
know, he feels like a reward. But I have definitely been in karmic relationships, and so I know what it's like to not feel emotionally safe or completely accepted or, unconditionally loved. And it's its own kind of wearing away of the stone. You know how they say like water wears away at a stone? It's very, very subtle.
So the point that you just made about feeling safe is, you would not hesitate at all with this person that you're with now to say what's on your mind, to be you, to let him see every aspect of who you truly are. Whereas in what we're talking about with a karmic relationship, there may be a hesitancy, there may be certain topics you don't bring up. It may be more that you, with the safety aspect of, if they really knew who I was, or I can't let them know this little bit, the vulnerability part.
Yeah, being completely vulnerable. Yeah, I think in the karmic relationships that are from the negative aspect, I think that's almost impossible.
Right.
And to feel that sense that I can say anything, do anything, completely open up my heart. And I think that's two ways too. I don't think I think when karmic relationships happen, I don't think one person is to blame and the other one is innocent. I think
No,
the two aspects of that karmic relationship bring out the best and worst in each other.
but I do believe there was an agreement before people came onto the planet to say, okay, we're going to get in each other's face at this point in our lives, and we're really going to learn some heavy shit, but hang on tight because it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you don't learn it from one person, you're going to have another karmic relationship and learn it from that person. Remember the story I told how I was having lunch with my friend and I was complaining about our boss and how weird and mean she was? And my friend said, Samantha, this is your third female boss that has had these same issues. And it was three different jobs. One was at a newspaper, two were at schools that I was teaching at. And she said, you're encountering your mom again and again. And until you deal with your mom and your issues with her, you're going to keep finding these mother figures in your life. And that was life-changing, that advice she gave me.
Well, same person, different face syndrome.
Yeah, yeah.
And but there's an addiction to that. There is again, the word familiarity, but there's a draw that pulls us in because we know how to navigate it. We know our response. We know what it feels like when we're with that same person over and over again, even if it seems like we've done the work in between.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, like I've read a lot of books about this stuff, and I think it's mentioned in that book, The Fantasy Bond too. Whatever chaos or drama or lack of that you were raised with in your family of origin becomes comfortable to you, even if you know it's not comfortable. And then
Right.
that's what you see as normal, and then you seek that out. I mean,
Yeah.
that is just fascinating to me when you think about it. I remember in high school, I had two friends who had similar relationships with their parents as I did. And I had three friends who had like really, really good relationships with their mom and dad. And my two friends and I would make fun of these other three girls. Like, I'm not kidding. I remember once we heard about this awesome party going on a Friday night. So we called them up and we're like, are you coming? And this is back in the days where it was just like in the woods, up a hill, and you had to like find it. Remember those parties?
Yep.
And my one friend was like, I'll drive. I got a full ticket gas. We'll go. And my three friends who had these lovely parents were like, oh, it's family game night. We can't go. And my two friends and I laughed and laughed and laughed as we climbed up that hill to that party. We had a great time. But there was a piece of us, at least of me, that really envied those friends, who were at home playing Monopoly with their mom and dad and brothers. I thought that was really, really lovely. But as in that moment, I couldn't see it. And I thought that was so foreign. And why would you turn up a great party to hang out with your parents?
Hmm.
Because that was normal to me. That to me, what was normal was getting out, going away from it, not, sitting with it.
Right. And it can, I think a lot of times with karmic relationships, it just feels off. Something never feels right. There's always a piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit.
Yeah. And it can also bring up all sorts of fun stuff for empaths like codependency, self-sabotage, tucking your light in. Those
Hmm.
relationships can be draining and exhausting. And then you get to that point where things just kind of stagnate and anger, bitterness, anxiety, contempt start to flow in. That's the death signal of any relationship, don't you think?
Very much so. And then if you couple all of this with an intense physical attraction or chemistry, then it really gets fun. Because when you have that intensity with someone and it feels like, wow, it couldn't be this good unless, and you can fill that blank in with whatever you want. But I think sometimes we may stay in a relationship because our physical needs are being met or addressed or experienced in a way that we might not have had in the past. And that can make it feel like it's a healthier place to be than it might than it is.
It kind of sounds like a drug addiction, doesn't it?
Hmm. Very
Like it
much
hooks
so.
you from the beginning. There's great highs and terrible lows, and you can't quit it. It just, that sounds, yeah. Hmm. All
Which
right.
mirrors why it would bring out the codependence in empathic people.
Oh, yeah. Very, very true. All right. Let's flip this and talk about how to navigate through a karmic relationship. The first key is self-awareness, and I think that's important. We've already touched upon that. Is really being honest and aware of the patterns that are at play in this relationship and start to pay attention to your emotional responses, your triggers, and the repetitive issues that keep arising. Understanding the role you are playing in this relationship will empower you to make conscious choices to move forward. That I think is so important, Denise, is where you recognize your role in the highs and lows of this relationship. Because we're so quick to point fingers. And very often, that can be easy and comforting. But I think it's just as important to look at how this relationship has changed and morphed you and how you're not shining your brightest light because of it.
And owning the fact that you might be the one changing the rules.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that's when things start to go south, is when you say, I can't do it this way anymore. But when you own that, when you have that self-awareness to say, it takes away any blame, it takes away any anger at the other person, because you're owning your own shit and you're saying, you know what, this is about me. And that's a really hard thing to do for sensitive people.
Yeah, it definitely is. The other thing you need to do is set boundaries because these karmic relationships can be all consuming. Setting those healthy boundaries is going to be essential. So learn to say no, prioritize self care, avoid getting caught up in their emotional drama. Boundaries will protect your energy and help keep you and the relationship from becoming toxic while you figure out how you're going to move forward.
I had such a fun conversation with one of my sons about boundaries the other day. There's been a situation and everybody's been involved, and it's all good. Nobody's, my rule, no one's in prison and no one is in the emergency room, so it's all good. No big worries. But it was about boundaries. And I said to one son, I said, and he said to me, he said, I have no problem with boundaries with other people. And he doesn't. It is phenomenal to see. He sets them, he sticks with them. There's no wiggle room. It's clear. It's never mean, or it's just very, he knows the boundary, he holds it and he sets it. And he said, the thing I struggle with is the boundaries with myself. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I know when I don't eat as well as I should, or I would really, I should be doing my laundry, but I really want to take that motorcycle ride. Or he said, those are the ones, or I stay up too late when I know that he said, so it's my self boundaries. And I thought
That
that was a really cool way to describe it.
Well, I think that should be a proud mama moment too, because
Yeah.
for him to realize that, that's all of us. We all need to learn to set boundaries with ourselves. And I think 90% of people don't even recognize that. And he's so young.
Well, well, he's a grown ass man, but anyway.
He's young. That's
the
fantastic.
but the point with the boundaries is I I think for some of us it never is an easy thing to do. And even with practice, we get better, we learn it, and we get really proud of ourselves. Please know, if you set a boundary, you just may, go into this little stage of double guessing. Should I, could I, would I, did I, feeling guilty, all the things that surround that. But that gets easier with time.
It really does. It really does. And you can set the boundary and that other person can push back and you've got to set it again and again and again. It's not easy. It's one of those terms that's tossed around so much these days that I think it gets oversimplified. Setting boundaries
It,
is hard.
it is hard, and it's so much to the individual,
Yeah,
because a boundary that I set, that I am just proud as hell. Look what I did. I said, I drew that line in the sand. Someone else is going to roll their eyes and say, you even think that's a boundary? That's just basic care.
right.
So I think we have to honor what the boundaries are for us, taking a page out of my son's book and just working our own boundaries first, and then seeing if we can take that same conviction of how we are able to set them with other people and do it for us or vice versa.
Well said. Okay, another way you can navigate out of a karmic relationship is to learn the lesson. Okay, that sounds easy. It's not, right? That's a big thing.
No, it's hard.
Whether it's learning self love or breaking a cycle of codependency or healing from past trauma, you have to identify what the relationship is teaching you. And once you've learned the lesson, the karmic bond often fades, allowing you to move forward. Now, I've talked about this before in past shows. This to me feels like magic because I've
Mm.
experienced this where I've learned the karmic lesson and then either everything usually changes, but always for the better. And it just fades away. Whatever that drama was, it just fades away or morphs and shifts and changes into something different. And it feels magical almost.
It is. It is really magical. Once you get past the bungee cord of it, it's gone, it's back, it's gone, it's back. And I think that when you actually learn it and again set the boundary and improve your self-awareness about why the lesson was even there to begin with, then you go into that stage of this lightness, like for me, a physical lightness, like I've released a heavy burden, but then there's this little edge of confusion of, oh, well, what do I do now that this is gone? And I think that that's something really important that a lot of people don't bring into the conversation is yes, you get out of the situation, you feel better, you realize you made the right choice, but then you're in new territory.
Yes. Yeah. And that's when I think you have to reach out for help and connection and support
Yeah.
to really help you figure out how to navigate through all those changes. Like going back to my earlier example, when I was having lunch with my friend, and she pointed out that all my mean female bosses were echoes and reflections of my mom. That's when I started seeking therapy, and I found a great therapist who was really loving and kind and gentle, but also a badass, and helped me learn to be one too and set boundaries. And it really started to shift things with my mom. And guess what? That female boss took early retirement, and the friend who sat with me at lunch helping me see this became my new boss and was the best boss I ever had.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Absolutely love
it
that.
just felt magical, you know?
Yeah. And to
No,
be and you were gentle with yourself during the process.
yes, most days. I don't think whenever you're trying to heal from a difficult relationship, it's not a straight arrow. Yeah,
No.
it's kind of a messy and all over the place, but I definitely did learn what I feel my mom came here to teach me, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, another thing you have to keep in mind as you're navigating out of a karmic relationship is how to let go. One of the
Yeah.
hardest parts of a karmic relationship is knowing when to let go. If the relationship becomes toxic or destructive, it may be time to release it. Holding on can prevent you from moving on to healthier connections and continuing your spiritual growth.
Well, and don't you think for a lot of us that the fear, for me it's a fear that, oh shit, if I don't deal with this, I'm going to have to come back and do it again. That
Oh, yeah.
if
Oh, no, thank you.
and I had this conversation with someone recently and I was discussing a karmic relationship in my life and I described it and the boundaries, I blah blah blah. And the person said, "Well, don't you realize that what you've done is just being healthy?" And they just almost looked a little confused, like, why is this even an issue for you? You're setting a boundary, you're being healthy, you're not allowing that person to steamroll you anymore. Those are all positive things. And I brought up this very connected person, intuitive person, and I said, but what about having to come back and do it again? And I said, I always joke and say I'm a medium. I know there's something more. And I've made this comment out loud to myself. We'll deal with this shit when we both get on the other side because I don't want to waste any more valuable time in this lifetime trying to make it okay for you at my own expense. So, but I do think that realizing that if you leave a karmic relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't complete what you came here to do.
Exactly. that is so true. And again, leading on the advice of friends or professionals or your higher self, I think can help you tremendously. I was absolutely terrified to initiate my divorce, absolutely terrified on every single level. And my therapist gave me the best advice. I think about it all the time. He said, the greatest inheritance you can leave your children is your happiness.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's a proverb. He did not make it up. But isn't that a beautiful statement?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's really, really true. And so, whether the karmic relationship is a romantic relationship or a work relationship, you always have to think about how is this impacting you and your health and your mental well-being, and think about, your own happiness.
And I'm thinking of if it's someone in your family of origin that you have to set boundaries with or step away from, or then you get into the familial impact of people may not understand why you're doing that. They may not understand, well, that's just the way that person is, or why are you taking this so seriously? You're the only one that knows if it's a karmic relationship that you need to step away from.
Yeah, and you
You,
don't have to defend your decisions.
exactly.
And I think that's a really important thing to remember. Even if you're the only person in your family to get divorced.
Just saying.
Just saying. You also need to work on making an exit plan. So, whether it is a relationship or a job situation, you need to have a plan that feels safe and right to you when you are ready to leave.
And just really, really important point. If you are in a relationship with a narcissist, it's a highly codependent relationship. If it's something where your self-esteem and sense of self has been worn down, you may want to keep your exit plan to yourself until you feel stronger with it, because that's going to be very empowering.
Very, very true. And this plan can take as long as you need. There's even when you realize you're in a karmic relationship, it doesn't mean you've got to get out now. You don't have
Right.
poltergeist in your house. It just means you have to be aware and recognize that this is no longer working for you and start planning. That could take 6 months, it could take 3 years. That's okay. You have to be gentle with yourself throughout this process.
100%.
And of course,
And
we feel that leaning into your spirituality is always going to help you. Anything you can do that connects you deeper within. Sometimes that's just breathing, remembering to do deep breaths throughout the day, or journaling, meditating, listening to uplifting, soothing music, or wearing or carrying crystals for protection and self love. And of course, just physically taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep, eating well, drinking water, getting exercise, and don't forget to pray and ask for help and guidance during this process. You will get it, but you've got to ask for it.
right. And it's not easy work, but it's really important work if you want to be able to address more of what you came here to do. Because I always, the picture in my mind with a lot of karmic relationships, and I get this a lot in readings, when little kids run on a playground and someone tries to grab the back of their shirt and hold them back.
Yeah.
I That's what it feels like to me. That's the visual I get, is that you're really ready to run, you're ready to be free, you're ready to really haul ass with running, and you just look back over your shoulder and there's no one pulling you back.
Oh, wow. That's a very powerful vision. That's good. I like that. So, karmic relationships can be a bit of a double-edged sword. They bring a lot of intense emotions and challenges, but they do offer valuable life lessons that push us towards healing and growth. And I think if anyone is listening to this and going, uh-oh, this sounds awfully familiar, because sometimes you're in a difficult situation, but it's become so normal, you don't even really realize it. And then you read a book or an article or you listen to a podcast and you're like, uh-oh, I think this is me. And that can feel really, really scary. But just know that as long as you reflect within and you're really honest with yourself and you look at the lessons that you've learned and the lessons that you are teaching the other person, Because I can promise you that. I can promise you that as much as they are helping you to grow, you are helping them to grow. But there might come a point where you guys have done enough for each other and it's time to let go. Because
Right.
most of these karmic relationships are not meant to last forever. They serve as critical stepping stones on our journey toward self awareness and spiritual evolution. And when we recognize the signs of a karmic relationship and embrace the lessons that it's offering us, then we can navigate these connections with greater understanding and use them as catalysts for personal transformation. Because karmic relationships remind us that every person we meet plays a role in our soul's growth, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves.
And we never know the impact that it's going to have on someone else's life as well. You showed the beautiful proverb from, it's Dr. Bennett, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we all know him. We all
yes,
love
the
Dr.
best.
Bennett. And but it is because it's causing that ripple effect. You stepping into your power, ending those, having the boundaries is going to be a reason someone else in your life may find the strength to do the same in theirs.
Exactly. Exactly. And focusing on your happiness is going to be so key. And remembering another thing Dr. Bennett used to always say to me, because I used to, I would go in and out of relationships with my mom. We'd have a fight and we wouldn't speak for 3 months, and then the holidays would come up and I'd go back to his office and I'd go, I don't know what to do because, my sister wants to have everyone at the house, but my mom and I haven't spoken in 3 months. That whole cyclical thing. And he would always say, do what you want to do. And I'd say, Dr. Bennett, that does not help me. And he would say, look, he would say, whether you go back into that or you stay out of it, you're going to feel guilty because that's what it is when you have a difficult parent, right? There's guilt.
Right.
And he said, so just choose whichever way you want to feel guilty. Do you want to feel guilty being in the throes of the family holiday, or do you want to feel guilty tucked away with your family on your own? Isn't that interesting to look at it that way?
It really is. And
Yeah.
and it's not being selfish, it's not being self-centered, it's really the epitome of self-care.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I always recommend that book by Dr. Bud Hopkins called Sacred Self-Care. If you guys haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's so, so good. And it really does remind you that it's okay to take care of yourself. It is not selfish. And I think a lot of empaths in particular feel that when we put our needs first, it is selfish.
Right.
But it's not. It's not. It's a way to focus on your light so that you can shine even brighter. Because think about that image Denise just gave us of the person holding our shirt as we're trying to run free. That if you focus on yourself and cut those karmic ties, then you can run free and truly shine your light and then share that light and help so many other people. That's what
Uh,
it's all about.
it really is because we've said this countless times when we've been teaching mediumship. Spirit's going to use whatever your memories, experiences, expertise. So all of this stuff that you're going through, all of these karmic relationships are giving you more to either be of service or to uh, emulate a stronger light or to be a model for someone else who's looking for the strength to do this. So it's not wasted time. It's not that you, oh, why was I so this, that, or whatever by staying in a relationship too long. It helps you become who you are, which is really, really incredible.
Yes. Really incredible, badass, strong, loving, empathic, and amazing.
Well, a big hell yes on that one.
There you go. We hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Please remember, as always, to show up, do great work, and share your light. But first, shine it on your own self.
Oh, yes. Take care.